Oh wow! Sprinkling some Stardust on the video really does work wonders. Hello everybody, welcome to the re-review, the series where I get to replay and reassess games from my favourite gaming era. I'm Brian, also known as UKGN Zoidberg, and I'm really enjoying this new format for the series. Rather than simply concentrating on the games that I personally reviewed for both Games X and Amiga Action, we've opened out the scope to include all Amiga games. I recently catalogued them, and that's well over 2,000 titles. That's a lot of potential games for me to talk about. Each month we're going to be asking all of our channel VIP members to vote on which game they want to see me talk about. If you stay tuned to the end of this video, you'll be able to see which two games you can choose from for the month of July. In this episode, however, we're going to be concentrating on the game that won our last vote, and that's arcade shooter Stardust, which was released by Days Marketing and developed by Bloodhouse in 1993. Prior to 1993, if someone, probably a geography teacher, had mentioned Finland, the first thing that would have popped into my head would have been rallying, but that's because I'm a massive fan of motorsports. One of the last things that I would have thought of would have been game development. So when Bloodhouse, a small team of ex-demo coders, announced their first game in the middle of 1993, I couldn't have been more surprised. Of course, these days Finland is a hotbed of games development talent. Almost everybody has heard of Alan Wake developer Remedy Entertainment, but it's also the home to Frozen Byte, creators of the Trine series, Rovio, who unleashed Angry Birds into the world, Bugbear Entertainment, the developers of Ridge Racer Unbounded and Wreckfest, and Red Links, whose Trials series has provided me with more hours of entertainment than I care to count. Bloodhouse, however, were Finland's first commercial video game company, and they were founded by Harry Tikkanen in 1993. Stardust was their first game, and although they had initially intended to self-publish, they struck up a deal with Days Marketing instead. The follow-up, Super Stardust, was picked up and published by Team 17 a year later. Following on the heels of Bloodhouse was a small company called Terramark, founded by Ilari Kutunen and Stavros Fasoulas. Apologies if I've pronounced either of those incorrectly. Fasoulas had failed to find a publisher for his arcade shooter Galactic in 1993, and that game ended up being put on a cover disc for the One Amiga. Their fighting game Elfmania, however, was picked up and published by Renegade in 1994. At the end of 1994, Fasoulas decided to quit games development altogether, leaving both Kutunen and Tikkanen to merge the two companies together. The new company, now christened Housemarque, would set about making the PC version of Super Stardust almost straight away, followed by the point-and-click adventure game Alien Incident and the isometric shooter The Reap. Over the next 10 years they would build up a portfolio of downloadable games across multiple genres. While games like Golf, Tee It Up, Dead Nation and Outland were all moderately successful in their own way, it was Super Stardust HD for the PlayStation 3 that really cemented their reputation. Whereas the original Stardust had used asteroids as its inspiration, HD was part of the growing trend of twin-stick shooters. Bizarre's Geometry Wars had been a smash hit on the Xbox the previous year, and Stardust gave PlayStation owners their own equivalent to shout about. Since its release in 2007, it has been converted to the PSP, PlayStation Vita, PlayStation 4, and even received an update for PlayStation VR. In 2013, they helped herald in the 8th generation of consoles with Resogun, which is widely regarded as the best launch title for the PlayStation 4. It also helped that it was one of the 2 free games given away with PlayStation Plus, which helped the game to reach a much larger audience. Even better was to come though, as they also made Nex Machina Death Machine, which as far as I'm concerned is the best game ever released for the PlayStation 4, and it was also the first game that I installed when I got my PS5. It's a balletic orgy of exploding particles and neon, everything that Housemarque excel at, and an infinitely replayable arcade masterpiece. In 2021 they were officially unveiled as part of PlayStation Studios, and Returnal marked their first attempt at a full-blown AAA release. According to UK Gaming Network, it remains to this day the best exclusive available for the console, and I can't wait to see what the team come up with next. Now though, let's go all the way back to that debut game in 1993 and see what the critics thought of Stardust on original release. Christmas 1993 was, as you would expect, a very busy time for games. Yet all the Amiga magazines still found time to review Stardust. Other games that were reviewed around the same time included Frontier, Alien Breed 2, Mortal Kombat, and Liberation for the CD32. Of the 6 reviews that I found, only Amiga Power deemed the game worthy of a decent level of coverage. In his 3-page review, Stuart Campbell remarked that it was a brilliant arcade game at an inexplicably low price. His only downer was the lack of a keyboard control option, but that didn't stop him from awarding it 89%, which was the second highest score of that issue. The highest score that the game received was 92% in issue 68 of Amiga Computing. Reviewer Simon Clays stated that it was an instant classic. David Upchurch from the One Amiga was also very impressed, awarding it 91% and stating that the game was an absolute bargain. The only other review that was more than a single page was in issue 52 of Amiga Action, and also the lowest score that the game received. Steve McNally gave it 78%, stating that it was not an essential purchase and that the game's good first impression did wear off very quickly. The average score across all the reviews was 86.7%. Let's load the game up and see whether or not I think it's still worth playing today. It's time for the playtest.
I think we may have seen an intro like this one somewhere before. Now while this scrolling text just keeps going past, I'm going to read you a direct quote from the Amiga Action review, the one that gave the game its lowest score. One thing that does concern me is that I can't find a story behind the game. As far as I can tell, there isn't one. Do we think the person that wrote that review skipped this part of the game, or only came in to play the game after this part had run? Do you think they ever actually loaded it themselves? This is, as far as I can tell, a story. Not a very good story, but it's a story nonetheless. So basically you can choose which levels you do in whatever order you want. It tells you what the difficulty is with a little score out of 100 at the bottom. So let's start with level 1 as a difficulty level of 12 out of 100. So obviously it is a graphical showcase for what the A500 and A600 could do. Every single level of the game does have a time limit on it, which you have to get rid of all the asteroids before that number reaches 0. But Asteroids has always been a game with a strong risk and reward element to it. Do you blow up the big asteroids as quickly as possible and end up with a screen full of little ones, making your life harder, or do you try and pick them off one at a time? This is where your weapons are shown on screen, and you can actually select to power up a weapon without actually using it. So I can continue using my 3-way, which is actually powered up, whilst I increase the level of the bouncer. There have been many attempts over the years to try and update the Asteroids formula with power-ups, and I think this is probably the most successful one that I ever played. I think the only other Asteroids variant that came close to being as good as this one was a game called Maelstrom that I played on the Apple Mac. But there are too many games that try to overcomplicate things. I don't think the soundtrack to this game is one that I would choose to listen to when I'm not playing it, but it's certainly a decent one and suits the game. It's not the most challenging end of level boss ever, but it's still enjoyable to kill. And now you get to the other graphical showcase. The warp sequences between levels have you flying down a tunnel like this. But when this came out in 1993, this was this absolutely blew me away visually. There are games like this on the Amiga where you fly down tunnels shooting at stuff that are nowhere near as good as this, and this is just a bonus stage. Now I do find that the difficulty ramps up a little bit too much in this area of the game. Now because I got to the second world, it does actually have a password for me, and that password is not identical for every player. The password is based on your performance up to that point. So I now get to replay the warp and go straight to level 2 again. I think the bouncer weapon, once you've got it up to a decent level, is actually pretty good. Although it's also kind of dangerous to use at the same time because it destroys things off on the side of the screen when you can't actually see them. But I think the fact that it can fire a lot further than the 3-way comes in a lot more useful, especially on these stages. I think it's great to see how the developers of this game clearly had an understanding of what makes a great arcade game. Even for a debut game like this, it's a great hint as to the great things that they would go on to create. The Stellar Blades, as they're called. Obviously nothing to do with the recently released PlayStation title. Uh-oh, I'm probably going to run out of time on this one. And this is what happens when you run out of time. So if you've managed to finish that level, then you do get the choice between the special mission or the warp sequence. The voluntary special mission is a little bit like games like Thrust. Just have to make your way around the level, avoiding the sides. Just once again got the developers showing off with their fancy backgrounds. If you look closely at the backgrounds, you will see arrows telling you that this is the way to go. Right, I think the arrows told me to go left up here, didn't they? So I'm going to head all the way back up there. What is over here? There we go. Is that it? And then the next warp sequence with an even more thumping soundtrack. I mean, gauging what's going to hurt you and what's not is quite tricky in these sections. It must be said, despite how good they look. I think there are a few things that the sequel did improve. I mean, for some people the graphics are better, but I think I do actually prefer the graphics here. But I think the difficulty balance is slightly better in the sequel. Possible weapon transport and space worm on this level. There's the weapon transport. Oh, that's a space worm. Come on! Kill it! Oh, game over again. So anyway, yes, let's leave the playtest there then. Bloodhouse did a very good job on their debut game there. But let's get on to the re-review itself and summarise my thoughts.
From the moment I saw the first preview of Stardust, I knew that it was a game that I had to own. Therefore, I bought it as soon as it was released, and I was not disappointed. At the time, it was a real graphical showcase for the Amiga, and I think it still looks great all these years later. In fact, I think this game looks better than the A1200 sequel that came a year later. Even though that one has more colours and detail, I think it lacks the clarity of this one. The spaceship that you control doesn't look as good either. There have been many attempts over the years to update the Asteroids formula, but none have been quite as successful as this one. Even Atari themselves couldn't manage it with Blasteroids. I could perhaps have done without the time limits on the levels, but that's a very small nitpick for a game that plays this well. I'm not a fan of the power-up system though. Being able to power up one weapon whilst using another is a pretty innovative approach, but having to press the spacebar to bring up the weapon screen in order to do so really does break up the flow of the action. I would have also preferred a more random approach to what weapons you get and when you get them. Despite these issues, it's still a great game though, and I actually wish that the Stardust series had remained an Asteroids variant rather than the twin-stick shooter it became. As you can see, in my Super League of arcade shooters on the Amiga, Stardust ranks towards the top. As always, only games that I have actually played are listed. Whichever version of Stardust you play on the Amiga, you're going to find a great looking, challenging shooter that I wholeheartedly recommend. My score would be 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching this look back at Stardust. I hope you enjoyed it. There are 50 previous episodes in this series, available in a nice little playlist on the channel. if you want to catch up on any that you've missed. The link to that playlist should be appearing on screen anytime now, if it hasn't already. All opinions expressed in this video are entirely mine and not those of the UK Gaming Network team. If you want to tell me your memories of playing Stardust, or that you disagree with something that I've said, please do so in the comments. I do read them all. The vote for the next viewer choice episode will go live on Monday the 17th, and you'll get to choose between Another World or It Came from the Desert. I can't wait to see which one wins. If you're not already a channel member, please make sure you click the link in the video description. Before you go, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss any future episodes. And until next time, happy retro gaming. Bye for now.